Okay. So in this part of the video, I will talk about the code for experiment 1 in lab 4. So before I get into the actual code for the experiment, I quickly want to talk about the code in order to set up, or the code in order to um, do the experiment. So pretty much, again, first we have to declare an object for the LCD model, right? So which is this line of code here. And then we have to set up our GPIO, right? Which the setup that we used, which is down here. And basically for the setup here, what I did was I used the diagram provided by Professor Arislin, where it displays what ports that were needed to enable, and what pretty much since we are using an LCD display, all these ports are going to be outputs, right? Because we're all outputting it all onto the LCD display. So they're all outputs. So that's what this is here. And then um, we have to enable all of them, right? We have to enable all the pins and all the ports, and yeah. So that's pretty much what the enable is, right? So that's what this number 19, line 19, that's what that code does, right? So then lines 21 is creating a hardware for the LCD object. Line 22 is essentially it's connecting the data port to um, port E, pins 3 through 0, and it's lines 23 is connecting the EN pin to ports D, uh, port D pin 7. It's connecting the RSP pin to uh, port A pin 6, and it's connected the RW pin to uh, port M pin F. And yeah, so now if we go on to line 27, so this code here, it basically um, it essentially is starting the LCD object, and pretty much this is the loading onto the fonts, right? So loading the bar graph fonts onto the LCD display. This one's also the LCD display. Okay, so um, now we'll talk about the part for the experiment. So essentially, what this experiment wanted us to do was it wanted us to um, start off at the number 4, and increase by 2 and add up all those values. So another way of saying it would be, so it wanted us to start at 4, then add 6, add 8, add 10, etc., all the way until 120. And it wanted us to output that result on the LCD display. So it wanted us to output that result on the LCD display on the next line. So essentially, the way I implemented that was I declared a variable called curve value, which I decided to label it curve value because I wanted it to state basically the current value at which we had it at. Another way of also naming it would have been the sum, but in this code here, I preferred it to call curve value. Okay, so now looking at line 49, I implemented it using a for loop. So in this for loop, right, I decided to start I equals to 4, right? Because again, we were going to start from 4, then go up incrementally by 2 and add. So again, 4 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10, etc., all the way till 120. So I started off at 4. I said I equal to 4, and until I is less than 121. So now you might be wondering why 121. If I said that we were going to stop until 120, but again, we were going to stop. This essentially means the same thing. So I is less than 121. So there's no equal sign, there's nothing. So that basically means that I has to stop before 121. So what's the number before 121? 120. So it's going to stop at 120. And again, we had to increment our value by 2 every single time. So that's what I did. And pretty much inside this for loop, all I did was basically what I said we were going to do, where we had the value, and then we're going to, once we had the current value, we're going to increment it by 2, and then we're going to add that together. So again, so if we look at this at line 50, right? So let's take 4 in, for example, right? So the current value is going to be equal to the current value, which I stated up here, which is 0. So 0 plus our I, which is 4, right? So that's going to be 4. So the current value after the first run is going to be 4. Now, if we go on to the next one, right, and then we're going to increment it by 2. So now I is 6. So then the current value, right, is going to be the previous current value, which was 4, then add it plus our I, which is now going to be 6. And it keeps on going like that until it reaches 120, right? So it's going to increment 2, etc., and then reach 120. Okay. So now that I have my for loop established, pretty much what I wanted to do was now the only thing that's left is essentially to display it on our LCD, right? So essentially, to display it on an LCD, we have to do 2 things, right? So first, I wanted to display, I guess, the sequence that I was basically doing, but due to the fact that it's a small LCD display, it's not all the values are gonna be able to fit into the display, right? So we can't display all the values. So therefore, I just decided to just show which numbers I was adding up, right, in this type of format. So okay, so let's run through the code. So first, I did the position, right? So I wanted the initial position to start off at 0, 0, which is basically the first row at the very first part of the display. So yeah, and then pretty much this print string here is on this LCD is basically just telling the LCD to display this on the screen. Again, basically displaying this string on the screen. Again, we couldn't display all our numbers onto the screen, so therefore we had to just take the shortcut here, which is still fine because it basically shows like what we're essentially doing. It shows the main point what we're doing. And then the next thing, right? So in order to print this value that we got here for the current value, we have to use printf, right? And then since it's a string, correct? And we're gonna basically display, because essentially on the next line after this, we wanted to display equals and then the number that it adds up to, right? So which is going to be our current value. And then this time I wanted to display on the second row, which is technically row 1, at mark 0. And essentially I wanted to print the string out, and yeah, on the LCD display. So now I will show the results on the actual LCD display. So let's get to it.
So basically, again, previously from what I've talked about, where I talked about the code, what we wanted to do was essentially make this LCD display. Basically, the screen should display the values inside the for loop, right? Or the values that I added using the for loop, right? So again, pretty much it started from 4, and then it added +6, +8, like +10, +12, etc., etc., all the way until 120. And pretty much, as you can see here, it added up all these numbers, which was basically what we wanted to display. So we wanted to display the summation, which you could see here, right? So it was the summation that we wanted to display on the first row, or row 0, which is this one. And then on the bottom, or row on the second row, or row 1, we wanted to display the summation. And confirming from the picture that we were supposed to get, the result is correct. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, in the code I explained how we got this, and this is the result I get. So again, if it's rather that I would implement this again, so if I build it, I load it up onto the board, I click my reset button here, it should still display the same thing. So I click the reset button. Now we look at this. right? It still displays that, which basically, because I had already run it, so it was already displaying that. But yeah, that's pretty much what we wanted our LCD to display. So yeah, as you can see here, it displays again the summation and the final value or the addition, right? So then if we go on to Professor Aris Lin's on his website, he basically stated that this is exactly what we should be getting if everything was implemented correctly. And yeah, that's it.